Hold up. Wait. We want to thank you for listening to the Pharms Not Farms podcast presented by Gorilla Healer by giving you a 20% off discount code to gorillahealer.org. Use code SEASON2 when you check out at gorillahealer.org off any item not currently on sale. And also be sure to check out buildthesoil.com, our Pharms Not Farms podcast sponsor, for all of your organic soil amendment needs. BuildTheSoil.com, the internet's #1 spot for your organic soil amendments. Back to the podcast. Welcome to the Pharms Not Farms podcast. We're here with a very special guest named Richard Rose. And Richard, I feel like the only person who can introduce you to the best is probably you, considering all of the accolades that you have. So if you'd be so kind to tell people who you are, what you're about, and why people know your name. And first and foremost, I just want to thank you for being here. It's great to see you. It's been a minute. And yeah, feel free to introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Brent. Yeah, nice to see you. It has been a while. So I started making tofu and vegan foods 41 years ago, and then pivoted, won the Inc. 500, selling America's most hated food, tofu, during the Reagan 80s. And then won the Inc. 500, and then a couple of years later pivoted to hemp seed when I realized it was as proteinaceous as soybean, what I'd been working with for all those years. So then I did Hemprella, the cheese, and Hempe burger, and then started shelling hemp seed. So hemp nut, I called it shelled hemp seed, and you know it today as hemp hearts. And then I retired in 2002, sold the cheese company, tofu cheese company, and been trying to be retired since then. I started the Medicinal Hemp Association in 2014, and no tobacco white paper, trying to teach people about smokable hemp and educating on CBD, and Hemp Flower Products Association, and advocacy for legalization of cannabis in general, and things like that.
And where are you located now?
I live in Italy now.
In Italy?
Switzerland. In Italy, yeah.
And you were in America when you were doing the hemp foods and tofu initially?
Yeah, I was in Santa Rosa in Sebastopol, California. And then when I retired, I moved to Amsterdam for 4 years. Then moved back in 2006 to Colorado, and then came over here in about 2016 or so. Okay.
And so what year did you convert from soy to hemp?
1994. Introduced Veganrella, the cheese alternative, and after Tofu-rella, Rice-rella, Almond-rella, Zero-fat-rella, Veganrella, and then Hemp-rella. And so that would have been 94. You know, hemp seed is about the same amount of protein. It can be eaten raw, unlike soy. Has fewer anti-nutritional factors than soy. It's been mankind's, the world of humans, at least twice or 3 times longer than soy. It's even, hemp seed as a food is even older than rice in Japan as a food. So it was from that introduced, blue corn chips and chocolate chip cookies, American sort of foods like I did with tofu. So it would be presented in a familiar manner to Americans and Canadian, sold in Canada as well.
And so you said 94 was when you switched to hemp foods. What was the climate like then? Was it well received? I imagine that it was probably a large educational process that you had to go through in order to get people on board and introduce this quote unquote new product, which as you just said, has been an original food for many, 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 many generations.
Yeah, well, 94, it was a go-go era, and there were some seed products. There was Mama Indica's and Boulder Hemp Company. They had a chip. Mama Indica's had little seed snacks. Linda had up in Humboldt Hemp had a chip as well, and but nobody had done a perishable food before I did the hemprella and or a frozen food. What's that? There we go.
Shout out to the beautiful Linda Hand, who you were so kind enough to introduce me to.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, she's a dear. Yeah, she'd been doing it before I was even doing the chips, and she did a baking mix, I think, and a coffee and a few other things using whole hemp seed. So we did a lot of education. We did a lot of PR. I did dozens of radio shows. We were on hundreds of TV broadcasts, news, mostly CNN on the menu. We were the lead food story the day after the election in 2000, when everybody wanted to see who won, and they went to CNN.com, and the lead feature was on hemp nut, shelled hemp seed. So I was on the Roseanne show on her afternoon talk show in 1999. We talked and made a hemp potato salad for 7 minutes or so, and we were all dressed in hemp head to toe, and did a ton of PR back then, and ads, a lot of ads. We introduced the hemp, the hickory smoked hemprella, and we did an ad with tie dye, and it said, when we first introduced hemp cheese, they said we must be smoking something. We are now, and things like that, in national ads, Veggie Times and things like that, Hemp Times, High Times.
Does hemp cheese or hemp mozzarella still exist as you know it?
No, so I sold the company to my competitor, Tree of Life, Soyacos, in 2001, and I think they discontinued it. But there's now better cheeses being made from hemp seed by some folks in Brooklyn and elsewhere. So there's a few coming on the market. They're vegan and they are aged. So it's a much higher quality product. And I still haven't tried it, but I read all about it and everybody seems to love it.
Cool. Big up to Brooklyn. That's big of you to call it a higher quality product. I wonder what you have learned about it that leads you to believe it's higher quality.
Well, there's two ways of making these non-dairy cheeses, and one is a mixing operation, and just like traditional imitation cheese was made, that's how all our rellas were made. And the other is something that Miyoko Skinner out there in the Bay Area, who I've known since the 80s, she started making this aged vegan cheese that uses Rejuvelac, which is wheat berries that are fermented for a little bit. And wow. She adds that to cashew, and it actually undergoes a culturing process for a few days at room temperature. And she's perfected this, and a few others have, and this is what the guys in Brooklyn are doing. They have some other cheeses, but one of them is a hemp seed cheese, and they make it in that fashion. And to me, that's just a much more superior way to do it. And it's 100% vegan as well. And it can be 100% organic.
Amazing. Yeah, it's important to eat foods that aren't laced in pesticides and chemicals that are designed to kill life.
Yeah, and how that's funny how the food like our grandparents used to eat is the specialty food now, and the commercial robot made stuff is traditional, flipped.
Yeah, and I had to tell that to my grandma. Like, grandma, corn isn't the same way as perhaps when you grew up. I imagine a tomato is even a little different these days. And she's like, it looks the same. And I said, yeah, but you have to really understand what's going on behind the scenes to realize what we're putting in our body. And so I just, I salute you for grabbing hold of the wave, so to speak, of riding the wave of pioneering healthy foods back into society, because we have an endocannabinoid system, and it's really important, in my opinion, and likely shared with many of us who have studied the human body, that this is how we're designed, and we benefit from taking care of ourselves the way that we're supposed to. And if our endogenous cannabinoids are not getting produced adequately, it's important we supplement with cannabinoids. And so, Richard, what do you think the difference is in terms of benefiting the diet regarding eating hemp seed versus somebody saying, what do you mean I have an endocannabinoid system? Does that mean I have to smoke pot? Because I don't like to smoke pot. And so what do you think the somebody who is new to hemp or cannabis, yet is hearing that it could benefit us, though doesn't really feel called to really commune with it or doesn't know enough about it. What do you have to say to that?
First of all, hemp foods are not a great source for cannabinoids, typically. They have trace amounts of THC and about 20 times more of that trace amount of CBD. Typically, especially in the hemp seed oil, you'll find a little more. But in general, people need to consume cannabinoids just for maintaining wellness. And it's apoptotic, so we never will know how many cancer cells were killed when we ate a little bit of cannabinoids every day. Not even enough to get high. Subtherapeutic doses, subpsychoactive doses we'll get benefit from. And the stony cannabinoid is just one of 150. The THC, out of 150 cannabinoids. The other ones aren't going to get you high, but they're going to make you a lot healthier and have less inflammation, fewer cancer cells that we wouldn't even know about, less psychosis for those prone to it, or schizophrenia from CBD or CBG or a Baron, any of the Barons, things like that.
So those are relatable. That's relatable information pertaining to the research associated with ingesting various cannabinoids. Now, what's the difference between that and ingesting hemp seed?
Well, there's just not a lot of cannabinoids in hemp seed. Typically, for instance, Manitoba Harvest is really good at this. They clean the resin off of the way hemp products in the past could, and today even could have cannabinoids in them, especially the hemp seed oil, is that it's not inside the seed itself, it's on the outside of the seed, in the resin stuck to the outside of the seed shell.
Meaning the cannabinoids.
The cannabinoids are in the resin, stuck to the outside of the seed shell. So when that would get pressed for oil or consumed, you'd get a little bit of resin, a little bit of cannabinoids. Now, that resin can be cleaned off. It's not that hard. It can be cleaned. And Manitoba is one that really has done for a long time the best job at that, meaning no cannabinoids. The problem with
because of liability concerns, more or less?
Well, for the same reason I had a zero THC hemp food product policy, which is cannabinoid consumption should be intentional. It shouldn't be undisclosed consumption that you don't even know, because some people have to pee in a cup for somebody.
Yes.
And if they fail that drug test because I screwed up quality control momentarily, they could lose their kids, their career, their job, their freedom, and really impact their life substantially. So even though I had a zero THC policy for my hemp foods, I told people not to consume them if they had to pee in a cup for somebody, just for that reason. And so they and also it's just sort of a food processing best practice to like remove a Schedule I controlled substance that's not disclosed from your food before you sell it to somebody. So that's why they've done, many other companies have not been nearly as conscientious as they, but we can easily consume cannabinoids, acid form. THCA isn't going to get you high. CBDA is going to do you a world of good as well. So we can consume non-psychoactive cannabinoids intentionally all day long.
In terms of hemp seed, if we're not eating it for the cannabinoid content, why are we eating it?
Eating it for protein and omega-3. So the hemp seed, the shelled hemp seed, hemp nut, is like a third protein and about 10% omega-3. And the omega-3 alone makes it better than soybean. And the fact that you can eat it raw makes it way better than soybean. Right there, plus all the other issues surrounding soy. Most of it's GMO, it's heavily sprayed with Roundup, things like that. So it's just another vegan protein source to people can consume along with, garbanzo bean or tofu or tempeh, things like that.
Seems like a lot of women or the potential for soy to interact with estrogen hormones in women creates a bit of a concern as well. I wonder, the protein content in hemp seed, is that, does it stand up to what we know as a good protein source, i.e. meat?
Yes, it's actually higher as a percentage in protein than meat. It's a complete protein, like soy and meat. It's limited only by lysine as its first limiting amino acid. It's a complete protein, meaning it has all the essential amino acids. And it's the type of protein, it's globular, not structured. Like soy is a structured type of protein, and this is globular, like the protein found in our blood. So it's a more assimilable form of protein. It doesn't have the trypsin inhibitors that soy has that inhibit the absorption of trypsin in the protein.
And omega-3s, are they necessary for our body to produce endogenous cannabinoids?
They are, in fact, yes. And they are kind of ultimately the precursor to all of it for our endocannabinoids. Omega-6 and omega-3, omega-9 are considered essential fatty acids. We have to consume them to get them. Omega-6 is kind of everywhere in the American diet. We get way too much 6, but 3 is lacking. So it's a good way to get the omega-3 that you'd only have to get maybe from fish oil otherwise, or pills or something.
I know coconut oil is also kind of a good source for some omega-3, though at the same time, being able to consume healthy protein while getting good, essential fatty acids, because that seems key, essential. And so many people have been talking about, since the 90s, about fat being bad and low fat diets and so on and so forth. So what do you have to say about that regarding you just said that you want to consume these fatty acids, and that they're actually precursors for our body to make endogenous cannabinoids, which if you are just tuning in to the Pharms Not Pharms podcast and understanding the endocannabinoid system, all vertebrates, everybody with a spine, including spiders, have an endocannabinoid system, which is known to regulate our immune system, our digestive system, our neurological system, these major bodily systems. So how do we stimulate our body for this system to be working in its optimal form and regulate these other major systems? And one of the ways that we're understanding that is to consume omega-3s and other essential fatty acids. So I'm asking Richard about the fact that we have known, or at least heard, all this information and what I can call propaganda about having a low-fat diet. And now we're hearing that we should actually have perhaps a higher fat diet, though with the right kinds of fats. And even if we're going to eat protein, the right kinds of proteins. So right now we're talking about fats. Richard, what do you have to say about consuming fats?
Yeah, there's been, throughout my lifetime, there's been so many canards about food. Fat is one of them. And there's even a diet, the keto diet, which is all about consuming tons of fat, and people still lose weight. So the things that we thought, I did a zero fat rella. I tried to introduce a fat-free cheese alternative, and nobody wanted it. And the reason why is they want to eat back then they wanted to eat a low fat diet and then finish it off with a big bowl of Haagen-Dazs. Or they wanted a low fat meal and they wanted a high fat cheese on it or something. It was this kind of conundrum, a dichotomy that we couldn't understand at the time until
supersized with a Diet Coke.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And so fat, we need fat, and it's not about fat, no fat. It's about the right fats and consuming good fats. And things like canola is not a good fat, and especially these PUFAs, as they're called, polyunsaturated fatty acids, when they're heated, once they're cooled, they become trans fats, and that would be canola, that would be hemp, that would be flax, these kind of borage, evening primrose, these kinds of high omega oils that once they cool, they become trans fats. So you don't even want to cook with those, unlike high oleic sunflower, safflower or something.
So you said you would not want to cook with hemp seed oil.
It's not good to heat it high because when it cools, it becomes a trans fat. because it's polyunsaturated.
You know, I've seen I don't know want to say a lot, but I've seen CBD products and hemp seed oil, and I've always kind of cringed. And you know, once you taste it, at least let me just say speak from my own palate, I didn't really enjoy it that much. Though at the same time, when I learned a little bit more about the hemp seed oil and the fatty contents of it, you know, I guess now I understand a little more, because I didn't even realize that was you know, one of the health implications as well.
Yeah, I think that hemp seed oil is an awful carrier oil for CBD, and the reason why is it tends to go rancid easy.
Rancid, yeah.
Yeah. If it's not made properly and stabilized, we used rosemary extract, rosemary oil, as an antioxidant to try to prevent rancidity. So it goes bad a little too easy to be used as I mean, if it could be bad in 6 months sitting on the shelf, certainly, even with CBD in it. So I think there's better fats for us to be using for delivering cannabinoids.
So hold on, you didn't have to use a bunch of ingredients that we never heard of in order to stabilize the preservation of your product? You just use something that we know that we can grow in our garden?
Rosemary, yeah, you bet.
That's fascinating. It's amazing how much wisdom there is in understanding, you know, the science of plants and what and our symbiotic relationships, really, you know.
Yeah.
Richard, you've been a pioneer in the hemp world as far as I'm concerned, and you went from, you know, I mean, the world as we knew it in the 80s and 90s was in relative complete prohibition, aside from Amsterdam, right? And maybe a couple other places that I don't know a whole lot about. Though I can say that coming from somebody, you know, I launched a product in kind of the beginning of the CBD craze, you know, and understanding what it's like to have to educate the public in order for people to realize what it is that's happening here. And, you know, I have a little bit of a different, or a lot of different, a much different scenario, whereas I work off of referrals and people come to me and I'm not out here marketing. You launched a product and you marketed it to the mainstream population and got major media and publication. What would you, you know, I'd love for you to speak about that a little bit, and you know, how you were able to bring a product to market, and for all the people out there who are interested in, you know, A, hemp foods, B, how to launch a product in general, especially introducing into a new market is something that you really believe in and know that actually could benefit the world. You know, would you open up that window a bit?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. So I had, since 1986, I started building a international sales and distribution network that had at its peak, well over 100 members, distributors, brokers and the like, and broker reps in the US and Canada. So we had the products in the Rella cheeses already in supermarket chains and health food stores coast to coast in the US and Canada. When I started doing the hemp foods, I just pivoted and plugged the hemp foods in as a line extension to that network. So it helps to not build it on hemp. It helps to build it on something that's a higher volume that, you know, like if you're a carpet manufacturer, start making traditional carpets and then pivot to hemp. Don't start making hemp carpets to start your company, because it's just infinitely harder to start it that way. Whereas if you're already doing something and you pivot to hemp, you bring the whole experience you've already created in the network and the business model and the protocols and everything to the hemp, and you can just plug in hemp as a line extension to it. So that's what I'd suggest. Now, if you're just starting out and you don't have another thing to fall back on, to use, to leverage like that. It's going to be just a matter of being really good at sales and really good at marketing, public relations, PR, education. This is a really education hungry industry. And you know, people appreciate learning facts from knowledgeable people, and they're willing to buy products to support that when they do get taught, trained, educated properly.
So it's the psychology of marketing that allows the education to be palatable and digestible for people to have to experience the feeling or the sensation of understanding why this will benefit us.
It's that, and you know, for hemp, we have an advantage in that it's inherently interesting. With tofu, when tofu products, we would do demos and sample it out, and people would like gingerly taste it and not, you know, I mean, once they taste it, oh, this is great. But not everybody wanted to try. But when it came to hemp foods, people were like, oh, hell yeah, let me try that. Oh, this is great. Hey, Bob, come here, try this. It's hemp, man, it's hemp. And you know, they would take packages home and turn all their friends on and tell everybody and all this stuff. And it was a very different experience. Now you can leverage that interest, that excitement, that sexiness, that stigma. Even we would even try to leverage the stigma. We would do first ones free promotional programs to retailers. We would call it barely legal. You know, we would leverage the wink wink nudge nudge aspect of it, which is built into hemp. And it would be a shame to like not acknowledge that and use it and leverage it to turn people onto your products.
Talk about keeping it real. You know, I for a long time did my best to keep the branding, the vision, the visualization of or representation of Guerrilla Healer not so cannabis driven, because I wanted it to be able to exist in the world and not necessarily have people, I just wanted it to be able to exist. You know, everything was so illegal, and it's so much different now, though at the same time, like, we are who we are, and there's no shame in our game. And at the same time, like, for me to really, you know, dig inside of myself and feel, reflect on how beneficial this plant has been for me in my life. You know, who am I to hide that from anybody else, let alone, you know, obviously we don't have to wear everything we do on our sleeve in society. At the same time, you know, some of us represent more than others, you know, and I think it's important to maintain that integrity. And I'm really inspired by you, you know, talking about what you are, because obviously this duality that I've been experiencing, whereas I want to exist in the matrix, so to speak, while at the same time being myself, because I've been blocked, quite frankly, from helping people because of my cannabis association in the past. You know, specifically there was this youth organization that I wanted to contribute to, and they were really interested in having me contribute to it. And then they looked me up on social media and they were like, oh no, we can't have this. And at the same time, in real life, they were all about it. And then they just saw this, you know, association with a plant and weren't allowed to anymore, whether or not they wanted to. And so that brings me to my next point or question, which is really, you know, introducing, you talked about, let's say you make floors, introducing hemp floors. So, you know, I spoke with somebody there, even in season 1 of the Pharms Not Pharms podcast. His name is Graham Marshall Mueller, and he's a builder. He buys houses and fixes them up and sells them, and he's great at it. We were talking about how toxic building materials are, and how most of us live in houses. We have no idea how toxic the materials are that we used to build them, how toxic they are that we're living in, literally. And, you know, when we're talking about the benefits of building with hemp, versus the current materials. There's many shows on that in itself, though I'm sure we could touch on that, though at the same time introducing, like, how do we introduce a product? You went from non-hemp to hemp in food, which is really a big thing. There's a lot of regulations on it, and building materials, there's a lot of regulations on it, whereas you can't just start building with hemp in commercial environments. You can get in trouble. So what do you have to say about that?
Well,
and like, how did you do it?
Well, we got some pushback, it was a different time 27 years ago. And the stigma was easier to leverage. We had a big pot leaf, neon green, on every package of hemperella, this big, on a purple background with the big word hemp, about this big. So it was on shelves across the country and Canada also, and it helped destigmatize to people the leaf and the word hemp, because they'd see it in their local health food store, and they it was no longer such a stigmatized thing that they couldn't even see it in the health food store as a food. And we were written in the business pages and the food pages, and that helped destigmatize the plant in general. And a few years later, they passed Prop 215 in California, and I think that all of us doing our bit to popularize hemp had a hand in that, because it got destigmatized to the voting public, and they finally passed 215. But the stigma, there's a lot of pushback from Whole Foods. They banned our hemp foods and hemp foods in general until 2004. I would find that I would walk into health food stores that had like a long-haired owner and were really hip areas, and I would show them the package, and they would turn white, and they'd say, you need to leave now, and kick me out. And I figured out it was because they were probably using pot money, money.
They probably thought you were a narc.
Well, they didn't want it on their shelf.
Or they didn't want to expose themselves. Sure.
They didn't want the heat from having it on the shelf. And literally, you could see them just like, they'd be smiling and all friendly, and then they'd show it to me. Yeah, you need to go now. We're not going to carry that. We just go. And
they're like, I'm not risking my family to sell you cheese, bro.
Right, exactly. And it was funny that way. I mean, even places like New Paltz, New York, hip little towns like that were doing it. And so there was and the other one pushing back was Ocean Beach Food Co-op, which said it was a political statement. They didn't want to carry it, but you got to realize this is a worker-owned vegetarian. They had no meat, worker-owned organic vegetarian co-op, which was a political statement all by itself. So between Whole Foods and Ocean Beach, we had it covered, but at the same time, it was being sold in the Travis Air Force Base PX, in the Travis Air Force Base in California.
That's amazing. So many people, including myself at times, have fallen victim to this. And many of us are living in this matrix of following mainstream, thinking that this is what we have to do. And then there's the quote unquote weird side people who, straight up live in color and don't put ourselves in a box and live square in order to conform and survive. Those of us who are, pioneering and building roads, so to speak, and bridges, it takes really living the dream. And what that means to me is living in our magic. And like I always say, we're the only ones who love what we love the way we love it. And so if we live in love, then we're contributing our love in that original way to our world in a way that nobody else does it. And so, there's like the vegan co-op that you just spoke about, like that is, to me, the ultimate contribution. It's the ultimate I don't even want to call it revolution or anarchy, though. It's just straight up like representing and being the change with which we wish to see, and contributing what our values are, rather than just conforming because we're told that we have to. And so I salute you for putting a leaf on there and putting it out there. And I salute you for, and everybody who was around you and before you and after you, who stands up for our rights to be free and to be ourselves and to be human, you know, and to have an endocannabinoid system, you know.
Yeah.
It's thank you.
Hallelujah. Amen, brother. Testify.
Yes, sir. Is there anything, first of all, is there anyone that you would like the people to look into to learn a little bit more about the history of hemp foods or hemp, or, anything at all that you're often posting a lot of information? And yeah, I'd love to offer you the floor and just, go on about your business and let us know what the deal is, and definitely some history lessons and where we can do our own research, because that's what sovereignty is all about.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So richardrosereport.com is where I'm posting a lot of stuff, and it does literally about 10,000 posts a year on CBD and hemp. I turned it down. It's going to be a lot less now on higher quality posts instead. A bunch of downloads there on CBD and on business, like forecasts and financial management tools that I used in the past and things like that. And then Chris Bennett is a good guy to follow to learn about the history of cannabis in different aspects, especially
great historian.
Yeah, great historian and ethnobotanist, and he gets into like how much cannabis is in the Bible, which is a ton, cannabosum, and proof of it. And he's been saying that for years now, and they're just starting to find more proof of it. So he's been right all this time. Gregory Zorn is a good person to follow for studies. He dissects them and posts the bullet points of each one. Gregor Zorn, and he does a really good job. There's a ton of people doing good education out there, and those are the ones that I follow, and I look forward to their posts.
Awesome. All right. So, well, thank you for that. Is there anything you would like to leave the people with in terms of, I also want to say that a good resource for finding out information about CBD and research articles that I have found is projectcbd.org. And they have a lot of different ailments listed that you can find correlating research with from the National Institute of Health. I don't know if they go as far as to link Google Scholar or anything like that to bring up everything, though they definitely have a good amount of stuff.
They don't, Granny Crow. You've seen the Granny Crow work where they have all those studies. I was trying to do Granny Crow without having to cut and paste all day and every new study. So it was automated, so I didn't have to mess with it, and it would give you literally up to the second results. Project CBD's another source. PubMed is another source that's worth checking out, and you can get alerts. So you could get like cannabidiol when something's published on PubMed, which are studies. You would get an email with the abstract and the link to it, and or let's say if, like arthritis, if you could publish, you could do a search cannabis in arthritis, and then set up an alert. So every time a study was published on that mentioned arthritis and cannabis, you would get an email. So there's a lot of tools like that out there. Google Scholar is another you can set up alerts on for certain keywords.
It's amazing. For so long, you'd speak with doctors about the potential benefits of cannabis, and they'd say, Well, there's just not enough research. And being a doctor, you learn how to qualify research. And so at that point, you understand if there's not enough peer-reviewed research that I can respect, I can't implement this into applying it to life, because that wouldn't be responsible. And with that being understandable, at the same time, for so long we've been saying, hey, look, it's working. Hey, look, it's working. And for thousands of years, people have been doing it and using it for various reasons and a myriad of conditions, of course, since, you know, when we're talking about our immune system, our neurological system, our digestive system, and how when we have those dials, our hands on those dials, we can affect so many parts of our lives. You know, now that it's becoming more acceptable and legal, we have the ability to do more research. And there's a lot of research available out there. If you look it up, and you'll find the correlating evidence that, you know, it's not just anecdotal anymore. It's actually, there's something to this.
Yeah, there's at least 25,000 studies on cannabis. So it's one of mankind's most researched plants. Adderall, they give out like candy to kids, today, and there's only under 200 studies on that. So when they say there's not enough research, they're right and they're wrong. There really needs to be more research, but it's no reason to not legalize it. We allow far more products and drugs on the market that have far less research. And this, at the end of the day, I mean, even DEA said cannabis is most safest therapeutically active substance known to man. So, wow. It's not like it's a toxic thing that's going to hurt people, and there's no reason to keep putting people in jail over it.
Amen. You know, I say this about the fact that we are not trusted to utilize this non-lethal substance that has so much potential benefit, I'll just say, for liability purposes, though, even though what I've seen is nothing short of miracles. I'd say that we are trusted with so many products that we can buy at any given time of day as much as we want of it without anybody questioning us, and they would kill us if we ingested it at all, or if we ingested it a lot, let alone the fact that on every restaurant we go to, there's a bunch of salt on every single table. And if we'd eat the whole bottle, we'd get critically ill, if not die. Yet we're trusted to use as much as we want. Nobody says anything to us or looks over us or regulates salt. In fact, I heard there was a salt tax many, many, many years ago, and people were, it might have even been a currency at one point, which salt is an essential nutrient. We have to ingest it to live. Now we need more salt in terms of on a daily occurrence than we would need cannabis, supplementing with cannabis, because for to sustain life, that doesn't necessarily mean to enjoy a healthy life that we don't need to ingest cannabinoids in some way, shape, or form, or at least allow our bodies, eat the right foods to allow our bodies to properly make the endogenous cannabinoids that it's supposed to. So, you know, if there's anything else that you want to say to the people before we go, I first want to thank you, or third now, I want to thank you and, for representing and being you. You know, you're a leader, and I realize how hard it is to be retired when you believe in something. But it's enjoyable to see you rocking and rolling, and definitely good to see you smiling and being positive. And thank you again for your contribution to our world, for introducing me to Lend a Hand. Also, shout out to Summer from Enviro Textiles, and also want to say definitely check out Jack Herrera if you're new to hemp or new to cannabis, and The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and anything that you want to talk about at this particular moment of signing off. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. No, just the last thing would be June is Hemp History Month, so expect to see at least a post a day on Hemp History Month on Facebook and on my site on that. And there'll be a lot of the stuff on the early days of hemp foods and probably some Henry Ford stuff. There's one going to be on a crop that was grown in California in 1994 that was DEA legal, a hemp crop. That'll be posted. There'll be a bunch of stuff June is Hemp History Month. Thanks for having me, Brent.
Yeah, thank you. And it's possible that the person that introduced us, I believe, introduced us can use some love and a shout out too. So shout out to Jason Love. Also shout out to the homie Dr. Bob and everybody else out there who's doing your part to allow the rest of us to understand the importance of this beautiful cannabis plant. And as always, we're gonna sign off on a nice deep breath to enjoy the blessing and miracle of this life. So if you'd be so kind to invest in yourself for a moment on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Good to be with you.
Cheers, man.
Take care, bud.
You too. Peace and love. Ciao.
Subscribe to the Pharms Not Farms podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts.